This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
All right, everybody. I am super excited today to have with me a dear friend and colleague, Chris Shelton. So welcome back to Confronting the Line. In case we forgot already, we are here to explore the world of personal development and examine the often blurry line between transformation and exploitation, between help and harm. Coming to the line where we can see both the light and the dark, the help and the harm, that we can really begin to learn and sift out some of the answers to some pretty confusing questions. So anyway, I'm really have enjoyed having Chris as a buddy. We're one of the very first people that I talked to because you did an interview, one of the only interviews I found in almost 20 years about Landmark in 2020 with a former staffer of Landmark. And we were and none of us had ever found it before. And then all of a sudden my book came out and all this stuff came up. I swear to you, Chris, it did not come up before that. And then all of a sudden Outrageous Betrayal comes up, that interview and all of that. So, it was just funny on the tails of me authentically asking the question, wait, is this a cult? Am I a cult? So, which is where my journey started, right? Anyway, you've been such a great buddy throughout that exploration. And I've learned a lot from both your show and our conversations. So I'm excited. Chris is here today to talk with us about, he has been developing a model called the REM model. And we'll get into, this show is going to be about that. And I'm really excited about it. Chris is really excited about it. And you'll see why. So, Chris, before we get into the REM model, though, I thought it would be good to, even though you and I have done several shows together, we've talked a lot, I realized today that we haven't really told my audience, who the heck are you? I think it's important because it kind of will start to build to your model. But it's like, can you just give us a little bit of sense of why are you talking about this stuff? Who are you? Where did you come from? Why is this your thing?
Yeah, no problem. Hi. So I'm a cult survivor and victim. Somebody who was victimized by the Church of Scientology. I grew up in Scientology. My parents got involved when I was very, very, very young, and so I grew up in a culty environment. And this was in the middle of, kind of in plain sight. This was in Pasadena, California, where I was raised. And I went to regular public schools, had a kind of a regular looking life. My folks were not, long haired hippies. They were regular working people. My mom was a pediatric nurse. My father was a computer programmer, systems guy. And they just went all in on the Scientology. And so I was along for the ride because I was raised in this household. They thought they were achieving spiritual freedom and, a better world, and they weren't. And unfortunately, they got me wrangled into the point where when I was in high school, I started doing Scientology services, and we had moved up to Santa Barbara, California at that point. And I started partaking in Scientology myself in high school. And right out of high school, they recruited me. Just like they recruit high school kids, into the military, they recruited me to work for the Church of Scientology. And I did that for 8 years in Santa Barbara, working at the church there. And then I doubled down at 25 years old, and I joined the Sea Organization, the SEA, as in the ocean, this sort of paramilitary outfit that exists within Scientology that is the core of the most fanatical sort of Scientologists sign on and give your whole life to it. It's a very kind of like if you become a monk, you're giving over your entire life to the church. That's what I did when I was 25. Okay. And you signed that billion-year contract that you might have heard of. And I went down to Los Angeles and worked and lived at the Sea Org base. They use paramilitary terminology because Hubbard created his own kind of little paramilitary outfit, the Sea Organization. And they sort of model themselves after the Navy, and they have uniforms and ranks and ratings and, yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir. It's how we talk to each other, and lived in dorms. And it was a kind of a militaristic sort of existence right in the middle of Hollywood, California, right there in these big blue buildings is we're our own little bubble world there. And I worked there for another 17 years. So 25 years altogether working for Scientology. And I escaped, left, got sick of it, kind of thing. When in 2012, and so at the end of 2012, I had finally extricated myself out of the Sea organization, but I was still a believer in Scientology. And so 2013,
Mm.
um, what is that now?
2013,
Eight,
10, 12 years.
yeah, 12 years. 12 years. I'm having a math skip there in my head.
It took me a
Now
minute.
it's like when you forget to spell the word and, you're like, well, so anyway, yeah, 12 years I've been out. And 2013 was the year when at the beginning of the year, I got onto the internet and I got to start breaking it down and taking it apart and seeing a
Mm.
lot of the lies and deceptions that had been foisted off on me for decades. They had successfully been taught to me, or that I had been dominated by these narratives and stories within the bubble world of Scientology that shaped my reality. And I didn't have access to outside world information or to the internet or to fact checking or to, critical thinking. And being in a cult environment, it didn't occur to me to ask a lot of questions because I not only
Thanks.
wanted to believe, I needed to believe. This needed to be true.
Mm.
Even when my parents started fading and leaving, and what we called in Scientology kind of going under the radar, where they weren't announcing that they weren't, Scientologists anymore. They just stopped showing up and kind of stopped taking the phone calls and stuff like that. And this was a point of major concern for me because I was as hardcore as you could be. I had
Oh,
sort
so
of
your
flipped.
parents started to leave before you. Oh, that's
Oh
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the 1990s, they were definitely leaving while I was doubling, tripling down. I joined the Sea Org in 1995, and they were pretty much out by then, but they weren't making a big production out of it. They weren't even necessarily telling me I'm out. They were just saying, "Hey, my mom was a lot more interested in me personally than she was in hearing about, all the latest with Scientology. But that was all I wanted to talk to her about because, of
Right.
course, my head was very much in the cult. This was my full-time thing. When I was in Santa Barbara, I'd worked a full-time job at 40 hours a week, then went down and worked at the church nights and weekends
Wow.
for 30, 40, 50 hours a week. And
Wow.
I'm getting paid $10 a week by the church. It's volunteer
A
work.
week? At least at Landmark, we
Yeah.
got $10 an hour.
Yeah, no, it was $10. There was no hourly pay. There was no coverage. There was no medical, nothing, no benefits. You just volunteer for the church. And the benefit you get is you get free Scientology services, but you have to make the time and
And training,
work out
right?
the logistics.
Did they have the training monitor? Because that's another one that I'm finding as now. I mean, I thought it was a Landmark thing, but I'm finding it's quite familiar that in exchange for your labor and your time, you're getting free coaching or free, sort of free. Like it's not actually legally. Once I read the Department of Labor opinion, if they actually said to somebody, okay, in volunteering, you can then have a free scholarship to do a program as a participant, that would actually be an exchange and would make some of that volunteering more legal. But they don't do that. They say and said, well, you're going to be in the back of the room. You're going to hear it all from a different perspective. So you're getting the program and getting training and that all is to justify your free labor.
Right, exactly. It's a little easier to get away with it when you are a religion, to
Yes,
have
right.
religious volunteers and not have to pay them or give them anything in exchange. Personally, I think it's ridiculous and should be illegal to get free labor from people. When we're talking, at the order of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours a week, I mean, you want to volunteer a couple hours a week, go
Right.
right ahead. When it's forced labor kind of situations and the labor is under abusive conditions where, yelling, screaming, degradation, insults are
Mhm.
are routine and usual, then I think, there's a problem there. And certainly that was the case in Scientology and even more so in the Sea Org. And I
Mm.
continued doing that work and doubling down and being there for 25 years because I was a man on a mission. I was very emotionally dedicated to the purpose of Scientology. It wasn't the day to day that got me excited. I hated the environment, but I felt it was necessary because this is what you have to do in order to get the work done in order to bring people in and salvage them. And that's how we talked about it. We were salvaging people, we were saving them. And I thought we were going to build and build a momentum and end up kind of, revising or salvaging society as a whole. And I was very frustrated the entire time I was there that it wasn't happening fast enough. And that's why I kept doubling down on it as I kept thinking, well, I can make a difference. I can do something about this.
Yeah.
And it was finally when I started realizing near the end of my time I'd had a lot. There's 25 years. There's a lot that happened in that time.
Right.
But a lot of abusive behavior. I was physically beaten up. There was food deprivation, sleep deprivation. There was one time when I was up for 5 straight days, and that's not as easy as it sounds to do.
No.
It was
It
very
makes you
hard.
crazy. I mean, it makes you psychotic.
It does. I have personal experience of that. Yeah, it really is crazy
That was
making.
one of the big things in the Landmark lexicon in the well-being checks. One of the biggest things you had to watch for if you were on the production teams is people were sleeping, because they did know that lack of sleep would basically make people crazy. What was interesting, what they didn't know, is that large group awareness trainings are designed to bring people into a hypomanic state. I shouldn't say design, because I actually think it's more of an accidental design than an understood deliberate design, given when they were designed and what we know now. But that's neither here nor there. They put you in a kind of hypomanic state, and then you got to go home, go to bed. And you've only got an 8-hour window. It was at one point they've actually reduced the hours. The forums were supposed to end by 10 o'clock to ensure, and then you have to be back by 9 the next day. Figure people have at least an hour drive on either side, or an hour, whatever. And so you're putting people in this super heightened state and then saying, go to sleep. So it doesn't happen. And especially if you've got any kind of psychological condition going on in any way, then
Sure.
mayhem
Yeah, for
ensues.
sure. So that was kind of my life. That was what I did. And there were a lot of adventures, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of, torments, a lot of nonsense. I mean, for 3 years of that time, I was locked up in a prison kind of system within the Sea Org.
Wow.
It was an ordeal. There was a lot that happened. And yet it was all for the cause, right? And so, you kind of put up with a lot of stuff until you suddenly realize, one day that you just don't need to or want to do this anymore. And the thing that hit me as the final nail in the coffin was realizing one day, literally just one day out of kind of the blue, I was putting my to-do list together for the day. We would call those battle plans in Scientology, or daily battle plan of what you're going to do.
Required opportunity work would be the Landmark translation. In its current form, because Landmark's had kind of 3 distinct eras. It has the Est era, the Werner Erhard and Associates era when the forum was created, and it has the Landmark era, which has a couple of iterations, but it's all kind of the same thing. But there was something you said very early on that really struck me that I want to circle back to for a second, which is you said I was a victim of. And I have a thing. I wrote some articles about this a while ago about reclaiming victim. That the way our society has so villainized victim, and I know this from as a woman, I grew up, the absolute worst thing you could be was a victim. So we'd go through all kinds of mental gyrations to not be a victim. And that was a big part of the Landmark draw for me, was because I could be 100% responsible, which meant translated into, you don't have to be a victim ever. So that struck me when you said that I was victimized. And you're a very competent, smart, successful human. Like, you don't fit the picture of the mealy mouth victim that, runs around complaining the world won't devote itself to you. Anyway, that's kind of like the moniker that's assigned to anybody who has the audacity to actually say, I was victimized. But I don't think we can heal without being able to say that. So I'm just curious. That struck me when you said that. I was like, oh, wow. Anyway, any comment on that?
Well, yeah, because I use that word rather than using, the word critic or, activist or something, right? Because sure, there's aspects of what I do that is activism, and there's certainly aspects of what I do that is criticism.
Okay.
But the right label for my relationship with Scientology is that I was a victim of Scientology, and I had to escape from it. I had to get myself extricated from it physically and then mentally and emotionally. And and I was in a place where I had been lied to purposefully and repeatedly. I had been beaten upon and physically abused. I had been psychologically abused in a number of ways. Gaslighting doesn't even begin to describe what Scientology does to you. And so the word victim really is the only word that fits for what Scientology did to me. And you're absolutely right that you will find social movements and groups out there who have a real problem with the concept or the word victim, or make fun of it or blow it up or turn it into something else. Ridicule it is something we see a lot in society. And every single time that happens, I believe, my personal belief is that if you were to track down where that was actually coming from or started, you would find some predatory personality trying to lessen the intensity of what they do to other people, because predators victimize people, and try to make less of it, or make it out that this person, their victim, simply couldn't take it, is weak, is frail, is making it out to be worse than it was, and blah, 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 blah. Well, we all know that there are people who will milk, things done to them, and they will try to get more out of that victim status than they should. We've all seen it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's an argument to be made that that doesn't happen, because of course it does. But I believe the argument to be made is that that happens a lot less often than people make it out that it happens. And that it is a very easy thing to use people who milk their victimization as a reason to ignore all these, the much larger problem of authoritarian, destructive cults and groups that victimize people.
Well, and even and one-to-one relationships. I think my unwillingness to consider myself or see myself in any way, shape, or form as a victim led to my being victimized much longer than it would.
Absolutely.
Had there been any kind of permission structure, in any way to go, wow, you're being victimized. I think the same thing. Exploitation is a kinder, politer word. Same thing. Yes, is there a responsibility that we stay there and we stay in some of those situations and so on and so on? Of course, both things are true. Yeah, we stayed and we were being lied to, or truth hidden. I mean, that's kind of more, there was definitely some direct lies in the Landmark lexicon, but it's more the lies of omission, like, no, that, we're done with that. That didn't happen. We've changed, whatever. And just with what I've found out in the last year has just been mind blowing, actually, about even when I published my book, I didn't know. I had no idea. When I published my book, I was at that, you actually helped me see it, was stage 1, which is the organization's bad, the work is good.
Yep.
Now, I do still think there is good work, but it's not there. I mean, there is good, all these groups have good work in them somewhere, but they're using good work to do bad things. If we want to put it in that kind of binary, right? So they're using good work to take advantage of people. I mean, when we saw the bankruptcy filings and saw that the C-suite, they're making $350,000 a year, which for a company of their size, and if you want to compare, like, are there C-suite people that make ridiculous amounts of money? Yes, we had some article yesterday about some head of a company making 52 million or billion, some insane number, incomprehensible, last year, while his organization lost 60% profit share. Like, come on. I mean, that's insane. But just in a very simple organ, our staff members are making $30,000 a year living in San Francisco. Like, they can't even live. I mean, I was one of the highest paid, making around 50,000, and working 80 hours a week. And, I was able to milk my per diem for a little extra, but that was mostly because I cooked my own meals. So, yeah. Wow. Well, that was, thanks for that. Cause I just think that's an important aspect. And because I acknowledge or recognize that in a particular situation or relationship or whatnot, that I have been victimized by predators or perpetrators, doesn't mean that that's who I am, is this thing called victim, and whatever we've turned that into in our society.
Well, exactly. And the other part of this, beyond the predators who are, the great white sharks swimming around in the, in the waters of human society, there's also the fact of our issues, one of the biggest issues that you run across or that comes up for people in cult recovery, eventually, it's not day one stuff, but it is something that comes up and boils to the surface eventually, is the fact of having to reconcile being a victim while also being a victimizer. And the
Yes.
fact that you were in a group where you victimized other people because of the fact that you thought you were helping them, maybe, or you thought you
Yeah.
were maybe doing something good. It's not like you meant to
Mhm.
be a predatory personality who victimizes people, but that doesn't, what you meant to do or what you intended to do doesn't matter in the face of you abusing people. And
Mhm.
that's something that we all, as former members, end up eventually having to sort of look at. And some
Yeah.
people can't look at that, won't look at that, aren't ready to look at that yet. And so they spin their own stories of why they're not a victim and other people aren't victims and there are no victims, because this is a very
Mm.
popular
That
narrative
kind of shield.
within the groups, right? That the dogma is all about how there are no victims, right? And
Right.
victimology and Scientology, they talk about no victims. If you're being a victim, you're basically being an asshole. And so there's that running in the mix too. So it's not just from the predators that this societal problem of not recognizing victims comes from, but it also comes from all of us in a way,
Mm.
until we're willing to really take a good hard look at ourselves and our own moral failings as part of being in the group. We got some looking to do. And that's, again, not day one stuff. It's the kind of thing that you can't be piling on people the first day they come out of a cult, because they're very aware of how they were victimized when they first come out. That's what gets them out. And they go, oh my
Yeah.
God, right? And that's good. That's the phase you want to go through first. Like, go through all that, revel in it, see it, like, look at how you were victimized. But then eventually you're going to have to turn that around and take a good
Mhm.
hard look at what you did too. And some people have an easier time of that than others, but it's something that, it's a sort of crossroads, I think, that all ex-cult members need to come to. And how they deal with it is a test of their character, really, and their own ability to take responsibility for their lives and for what they do to others, right? So it's a kind of a heavy
Well,
point,
and what would you
you know?
say about, so this is interesting because I would say I'm kind of at that phase, as it were, in my own
Mm,
journey and evolution of understanding
mm,
is, as I've been now really unpacking and understanding what has been the damage, right? And how did that happen? And how is that linked to the ideas that, I study a lot. I've studied a lot since I left. I understand psychology much deeper than most landmark leaders, because you're not allowed to study any of that when you're there. You have to leave before you can start. But where's the line, you think? I was a program leader and a staff member, so I'm happy to say I never choked anybody. I never did some of the worst of the
sure.
behaviors.
Yeah.
I actually happened to lead and facilitate in a division that was based in a really different approach that honestly, oh my God, I just feel by the grace of God, there go I. But anyway, so we didn't have even the verbal kind of abuse I've since learned of. I always joke I was in happy camp, but I was still in camp. And I raised millions and millions and millions of dollars for the organization and then subsequently for Warner. So I've been examining this, but I wonder where that line is. I talk to a lot of people that go, well, that wasn't my experience. I didn't get hit. I didn't get punched, especially if they were not on staff or were not in a centers
Right.
division program leader body. Like, that's where the bulk of the abuse was
Mhm,
in that organization.
mhm.
And I mean, just even in the hundreds of people I've talked to since, I've heard some of it from the division I was in, but most of it is from the kind of core main public facing, as it were. So if I were somebody that participated and, for however many years, I actually have a friend who just told me the other day, she's like, oh yeah, I went to Scientology for 8 years. I'm like, you did? So is there a line where that what you just said applies or doesn't apply? If I'm just participating in the courses, for example, am I complicit in the abuse of these organizations,
I mean,
in
you're
your
paying
opinion?
money to an organization that is ultimately serving the interests of one man who's a predatory personality that abuses
Mhm.
people. So, to a degree, yes. But did you know? What could you know? These are the
Right.
questions. I mean, it all comes down to the individual and their circumstances and their attitudes about it, too. Because in terms of how they're going to come to their own personal reconciliation of this. But understand that everything I just said about victimizers is something that a person has to come to themselves.
Right.
This is not a matter of group shaming and humiliation
Mm-mm.
sessions. And we need to have, group support sessions of ex-cult members who, are going to shame people into seeing their
No, that's what
responsibility.
we did in the cult.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm
That's what we
taking
did in the
pains
group.
to say that out loud, right? Is that's not what I'm talking about.
No.
I'm talking about a personal journey where in recovery, you have to look at all aspects of what happened to you. And I think that's really where it starts coming out for people because they find their own answers to this. And it's not on me to tell them where the line is drawn. It's on them to figure that out. I just want to point out the area to inspect, like, hey, here's an area to look at, right?
Yeah.
Here's another area. It's called trauma. You might want to check that out too, right? That's something to know about. And here's this other area over here, right? Called recruitment. And did you ever recruit anybody into the cult? Okay, let's take a look at that, right? What did you do?
Yeah.
How'd you do it, right? Like, not give me all the, specifics of, the evil acts you did trying to help people. It's just, oh, I tried to help them, but actually it wasn't really help. And it's sort of like kind of reframing your experiences,
Yeah. That's
like
been the biggest thing for me that has been really showing up because, and it's something that probably could only show up with a 20-year lens, which was the other thing I wrote down that you said, you said something when you were talking about your parents, like they went to Scientology seeking spiritual engagement and growth and maturation. And then you made the comment, they weren't spiritually grown. And I was going to ask you, this goes together with what we were just saying, because that's kind of what I'm seeing. I'm like, I've had as many participants and people who've come to me saying, let me tell you about how I feel that I was damaged by my participation or my employment. I've also had many, many, many people come to me and say, I want you to know you made a difference for me. And what I've had to learn to do is hold both, like really hold both. And not without diminishing one or the other, without putting them in competition with each other or whatever, but just to hold both. Like, yeah, there's lots of interactions that made a difference and so forth. But this thing you said, and it's interesting to me that your parents then just kind of quietly stepped away. So, and you said they weren't spiritually grown. How do you know? Like, what's your evidence? This is what I sit around and think about because I'm like, because I can see participants that were in courses of mine that literally are dealing with the same underlying things today. And I would say that's definitely true for my husband and I. My husband and I have done more maturity and growth spiritually, emotionally, health-wise in the last 5 years than in our 20 years of Landmark combined. I kid you not. So that's why I'm now starting to say, I don't know if that works as well as I thought it worked. I'll give them that there's tools there that are useful. They're in my tool chest. I even use them from time to time. But they're minor tools in a big game. And that's been a little bit tough in part because it's just a little bit like I just spent way too long in one lane. And, and life's short. Like we don't, we only have maybe 80, 90, 100 years here. And that's short in the thing. And that's what I've been wrestling with. But there's also this thing, I'm not so sure people transform, not in the way it gets defined there, but I think it means something different in reality than what we had it mean at Landmark, or at least in the era that I was there.
That's right.
So I'm just curious what we had you say.
They're selling a narrative of self-improvement and spiritual improvement, right? Whether in Landmark or Scientology, it's about improvement. And of course, in Landmark, they use the word transformation. They don't use that word in Scientology. They talk about case gain and moving up the bridge, this series of indoctrination steps that you do in Scientology as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the belief set. You go up the bridge, they say. And that's the process of transformation. It's spiritual enlightenment. It's achieving personal immortality. It is achieving or securing your eternity. These are the phrases that they use in Scientology rather than transformation.
Definitely way more the religious side,
Yeah, but it's all wrapped up in the same concepts, right? You are here. Even Hubbard talks about with the bridge analogy. He says, well, what we're trying to do is cross a chasm of darkness and ignorance and bring you to a higher plane of existence and a higher state of being. And all of this, of course, is, is an illusion, is a narrative. It's a story that's being sold to people so that they'll continue to pay and pay and pay and pay, because Scientology at the end of the day is really just a money-making operation.
Right.
And so that needs to be said out loud, right? Just to be clear about that.
Same with Landmark.
Yeah, exactly. And same with Landmark, right?
I think Landmark could actually fix its problems pretty easy if they would pay attention and actually get honest with themselves. Because all you would have, stop promising outcomes, stop promising transformation, stop all that shit, and just say, hey, we offer some tools. They're not the only tools. There are some tools. And, actually keep to a lot of their own policies. They actually have quite a few policies that are meant to keep participants safe that they disregard and ignore on a regular basis. And then their entire marketing model needs to go away as the way of the dodo bird, as my mother would have said. Like, it expired so many years ago. It's so rotten and so unworkable. It's ridiculous. And because almost all of the abusive and weaponized application of the ideas happens inside the pursuit for results. It's almost where
Right.
almost all of it is. Not
Right.
entirely, but a lot. Like, that's where the worst of it is to, in the name of having somebody perform, but they're almost always performing for a registration. All
Right.
right. So how are your
Exactly.
parents? How's your relationship with your parents now? I'm curious. So they kind of stepped away. You, sounds like you more popped out a little bit and then started a long journey. But how's that now?
Yeah, I mean, my leaving Scientology was a 10-year process of realization after realization, sort of
Mm,
things I needed to see, and then yet couldn't accept yet the full reality of what was going on, and so I needed another thing and another. I talk often about how leaving a cult or waking up from a cult is often, not always, but often is due to a moral dilemma or conflict of
mhm.
magnitude that hits a person. They're suddenly being ordered to disconnect or shun their parents or something, right?
Definitely
Or they
fits my
have to
picture.
do some. They're told to do something that is morally reprehensible, and they realize, because they're still holding on to their own moral foundations in some fashion, that, oh, this is bad, this is wrong, I can't do this, it's an offense to them, right? And so they then, well, wait a minute, I'm in an environment where I'm not supposed to be being told to do stuff like that, what's going on? And that's what starts getting the thinking, right? um
And then it
that's
is
a
an
way that
unraveling.
happens.
I'm a knitter and I've had to like unravel, but it's like that. It is an
Yep.
unraveling. Like, you
Yep.
recognize, wait, something's wrong, and then maybe you back up and correct that stitch, and then, oh, and then pretty soon you're unraveling the whole piece. And
That's
that,
right.
I would
That's
say
right.
and
And
that
when
takes
you're in for years and years and years, you've woven quite a bit, right? And there's a
Mhm.
lot there that you've invested in and emotionally dedicated yourself to. And you've aligned morally with this group. And you think this is what we used to say in Scientology, this is the greatest good for the greatest number.
Yeah,
So even if I'm having a shit day, or even if I'm getting, crapped on, it's still the greatest good for the greatest number that I be here. So, this is old ethics idea called utilitarian ethics, right? Greatest good for greatest number. And if you care about other people, then that is a phrase that means something
mm,
to you, right? You want the best for other people means sometimes you have to make personal sacrifices. And I went along with that logic for a very, very long time. And it took 10 years of sort of chiseling at, some of my own moral layer, right, to really get that I was involved in a group that, I started acknowledging was not a really good group. I was thinking
yeah,
internally for many years, there's something really wrong with this place. But this is the only game in town. See, there
right,
is nobody else doing Scientology. This is it.
right,
So I can't just leave, even if everybody around me is an asshole. And even if the guy in charge doesn't really know what he's doing, this is it. And
right.
I was a total believer in the transformational potential of Scientology. I really thought it was the bee's knees.
Mhm.
And so even if all these people were letting me down, or the organization didn't look like it knew what it was doing, I didn't have anywhere else to go where I was going to be able to get a tenth of the work done that I thought I needed to be doing to bring Scientology to the world. That was my jam. And not everybody in the group, I've come to learn after leaving, was there on the same terms I was. They were not,
Okay.
necessarily as group focused as I was, but that was my experience with it, right? And I let myself endure an awful lot of nonsense because I was so dedicated. And I thought that's just part of life. That's just part of the game of life. Who said this was going to be a smooth ride? Right. So I had a
Right.
lot of justifications and rationalizations built up over the years to keep me in, despite knowing I'm in a place that ain't that great. It wasn't
Right.
even like I was rainbows and
Not
butterflies and in
comfortable.
some,
Yeah.
fantasy land, right? I wasn't. I had a pretty good idea that this was not a good group, but yet here I was, right? So it was finally the day that it hit me that my day to day, my battle plan was a pack of lies. I was lying to people to get them to come back in or recover them
Mm.
or sell them Scientology. And this was all I was doing all day, was recovering people or working with other Scientologists and that kind of thing. And so it once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It was one of those shit. I'm going to go see Bill, and in order to get Bill to come back in, I'm going to have to tell him that, and guess what? 3 of those things are lies. Oh, that's not good. Damn, because I grew up with very solid and factually Scientology based beliefs that lies are bad, right? And so how is it that I'm a Scientologist professionally and I'm lying all the time? That was one of those like moments for me where the clouds parted and the angels sang and the light came down and I was like, damn. And that was a big moment for me, because I had built up so many rationalizations and so many,
Can you give
reasons
me an
why this
example
was
of one of the lies?
okay. Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, for example, I'm going to recruit somebody to work for Scientology
Okay.
and they go, okay, well, do I get any days off? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
You get a day off every week, provided your statistics, your production is uptrending, right? Yeah, of course you can get a day off, knowing full well that I had only had 5 days off in the last 5 years. So I'm
Okay.
selling something that technically is true. Potentially, you could have a day off every week, right? But I know damn well that isn't how it ever
It
plays
doesn't
out,
happen. Mhm.
right? Oh yeah,
It's exactly the same at Landmark,
you
by
can
the
have a
way.
2-week paid vacation, no problem, right? When was the last time I took a 2-week paid vacation? In 25 years working for the Church of Scientology, the longest stretch of time I ever took off was 3 days in a row,
Somebody
right?
was
And I'm telling
messaging
people 2 weeks off, no problem, right? I mean, this is what
somebody
I'm
was
talking about.
messaging me the other day, former
Yeah.
staff. I mean, if you wanna know the truth about the organization that is Landmark, we'll put the ideas part aside for a minute. If you wanna know the truth about the organization, get a former staff to tell you the truth, which will be difficult to do. I just did a fantastic interview with 3 former staffers from the LA Center, and, they told the truth, and one of the bits of the truth they told is how we never tell the truth, that the staff conversation we have with each other behind the scenes and I would say even separated from that because I was in this wisdom area, I was in this other area, and my husband was a center manager. He was in that spot. He was in what I would say probably one of the better centers in the sense that mostly because he was the kind of center manager, as many of them are, that took a lot of the abuse on himself and didn't turn around and pass it on. Like his part of his role was to take the abuse from higher up to protect the graduates. So there's a lot of love for the graduates.
That's
Lot, a
kinda
lot, a
how
lot
I
of love for the graduates. Yeah,
dealt with it. Yeah.
and I knew, like, it was really hard at the beginning of our marriage, he was working 6 days a week at least, insane hours and all this stuff, but I still even from him now, he's telling me now stories of things that happened to him that are jaw-dropping. I'm like, "What? What?" We just celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary. I've been married to this man for 26 years. Love him madly. We're very close. And he is just now actually recognizing some of the things that happened to him that were quite traumatic and very abusive. And I know
Yeah.
there are so many Landmark staff members out there. Speaking of my knitting analogy, one of the other things you do when you realize that it's too far gone and you've messed up the project, you wrap it up and you put it in a bag and you put it in the closet and it sits there for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yep.
But that's
Yep.
kind of the way that trauma goes.
That's right.
You don't yet have the framework or the distance or the support to unravel. So you put it away and you think, well, as long as it's over there in that closet, it's not bothering me
That's
until
right.
you go to move. I'm packing
That's
up my
right.
house now because we're about to move. And I'm like, wow, look at all those unfinished projects. But that's exactly how trauma is. And it comes up and it goes, wow, that time. My husband was telling me the other day about sitting in a circle, because he was also a seminar leader, sitting in a circle and having he'd left staff by now, but he was still a seminar leader. And the new center manager, who, he regarded as a friend and a colleague, sat there while 2.5 hours seminar leaders went after him about what was wrong with him and where his integrity was out, da 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 da, until a process that Marcia reveals in her book started out as the pit. It's a milder version of it, but same psychological process. And I mean, he just did a few sessions with his therapist doing some EMDR on that, because he just now realized how much that undermined his sense of self. I have to brag on my husband. He just turned 70 this year, and he has done more actual transformation in the last 2 years than in the 24 before, since I've met him. I mean, it's really incredible. And
Yeah.
it's because we do multidisciplinary things. We have a spiritual teachers that we work with. We have a couples therapist family therapist we work with. He went dealing with another traumatic issue. He went and did some sessions with a therapist trained specifically in that. No, he's like actually multidisciplinary. Whatever comes up for him to do, he finds somebody who's an expert in that and does that work. And which is another big thing, folks. If you think whether it's Scientology, Landmark, anything, that's going to be the answer to all your problems, doesn't work that way. Just doesn't work that way. Well, this is really awesome. Hey, folks, we're going to take a little pause here. Chris and I talked for 2 hours. It's such a fantastic conversation. I'm so really excited to be sharing it with you. And we're going to actually break it here, and I'm going to put this part out, and then I'll be working on editing the next part where we really get into Chris's REM model and putting that out in the next few days. One other little thing I wanted to mention, I think this is a good point for it, is I want to put in a little plug for our Healthy Healing group with Rachel Bernstein. These sessions have been really extraordinary, and they are for anybody who feels like they have some healing to do, associated with being a part of a group like Landmark, Scientology, any of those, or large group awareness training, or maybe you're just feeling confused because you thought you transformed, but you're not feeling so transformed. So just want to invite you to consider this group. We have a sliding scale fee, and we have lots of room for anybody who'd like to join. In these group discussions, we learn about the unique dynamics and manipulation tactics and common psychological effects of being involved in these high control environments or relationships. Sometimes it's just a relationship. It's not a whole group. Rachel is a licensed therapist, an educator about cult-like and high control groups, and the host of the popular podcast Indoctrination. So if you want to get a sense of her, go over and listen there. She facilitates the group. It is a compassionate and supportive space where people can ask questions, get answers, recover, heal, grow, and really reclaim our autonomy. Come to feel understood, validated, and supported in your journey. Thank you. See you soon. Hey, folks, we're going to take a little pause here. Chris and I talked for 2 hours. It's such a fantastic conversation. I'm so really excited to be sharing it with you. And we're going to actually break it here, and I'm going to put this part out, and then I'll be working on editing the next part where we really get into Chris's REM model and putting that out in the next few days. One other little thing I wanted to mention, I think this is a good point for it, is I want to put in a little plug for our Healthy Healing group with Rachel Bernstein. These sessions have been really extraordinary, and they are for anybody who feels like they have some healing to do, associated with being a part of a group like Landmark, Scientology, any of those, or large group awareness training, or maybe you're just feeling confused because you thought you transformed, but you're not feeling so transformed. So just want to invite you to consider this group. We have a sliding scale fee, and we have lots of room for anybody who'd like to join. In these group discussions, we learn about the unique dynamics and manipulation tactics and common psychological effects of being involved in these high control environments or relationships. Sometimes it's just a relationship. It's not a whole group. Rachel is a licensed therapist, an educator about cult-like and high-control groups, and the host of the popular podcast Indoctrination. So if you want to get a sense of her, go over and listen there. She facilitates the group. It is a compassionate and supportive space where people can ask questions, get answers, recover, heal, grow, and really reclaim our autonomy. Come to feel understood, validated, and supported in your journey. Thank you. See you soon.